It was supposed to be a day filled only with love and blessings. But from the first second, a pair of eyes out there had already refused to let them have peace. The late afternoon sunlight bathed the rooftops of the elegant mansions in Northdale in gold, where everything from the trimmed grass to the picket fences seemed measured by the ruler of perfection. In the spacious backyard of house number 27, a long banquet table shimmered beneath fairy lights draped in white linen, adorned with lilies and lavender. Every detail had been prepared for a special day. Laughter echoed. Glasses clinked. Children ran around the small fountain. The wedding of Selina Ross, a federal judge, and Adrian Cole, a senior agent with the Department of Justice, wasn't extravagant in the traditional sense, but deeply personal and intellectually poised. Selina, with her classic black curls and eyes sharp as blades, the same eyes that had once determined the fates of countless defendants, was today radiant and gentle in an ivory hand-embroidered gown. Adrian, in a suit, not overly formal, but with every gesture exuding the presence of a man who had commanded nationwide operations, couldn't seem to take his eyes off his wife. They stood in the middle of the lawn hand in hand, like two pillars holding steady against the evening breeze. Blessings, joyful laughter, and hopeful gazes surrounded them. It seemed nothing could tarnish the atmosphere. "This is the home we will keep building," Adrian whispered into Selina's ear after their vows. She smiled the smile of someone not just newly married, but stepping into a new chapter of resistance against the injustices that still loomed in their society. From the second floor of a house a few doors down, a gaze was fixed on them, not with emotion, but with discomfort. And that gnarled, veined hand slowly lifted the landline receiver, dialing 911 in a voice trembling with intention. Inside, house number 22, Mrs. Meredith Grant, 78 years old, leaned back in her armchair by the second-floor window. Her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, as though never letting go of control. She had lived in Northdale for nearly 4 decades, long enough to remember every license plate, every homeowner, and every unusual dog bark at 3 a.m. And today, in her eyes, the abnormality was the wedding at house number 27. Mrs. Meredith peeked at the wedding through the lace curtains, as if surveying a crime scene. She saw well-dressed black guests and heard the gentle jazz music blended with laughter and conversation, and not a single part of it put her at ease. "This isn't like those neighborhoods," she muttered, lifting the landline receiver. Her voice trembled, but every word was deliberate. "Hello, dispatcher. I want to report a suspicious gathering. There are a lot of strangers. Noisy. They don't look decent. I'm afraid there might be violence or some dealing going on." Every word was carefully chosen, laced with vague innuendo, not enough to be charged with slander, but more than enough to plant seeds of doubt. At Precinct 4, the call was received by a young dispatcher named Andrea. It was a quiet afternoon, with only a few minor traffic collisions and a missing cat case. Andrea logged the report into the system. She furrowed her brows as she read the note. Large party, possible drugs, unusual noise. Elderly resident feels threatened. Less than 10 minutes later, patrol cars 7 and 12 were dispatched to 27 Northdale. In car 7 sat Sergeant Kevin Mallory, a man with a record of excessive force complaints during civilian interventions. He flipped on the siren and adjusted his gun strap. Next to him was Officer Raymond Beck, fresh out of the academy for less than 2 years, but already well-versed in the habit of staying silent in the face of authority. A party like that in this neighborhood. Something's not right today. Kevin smirked, cracking his knuckles. The siren wailed the first warning of a storm that no one at the wedding knew was coming. Meanwhile, Selina and Adrian were opening their first wedding gift, a silver photo frame, engraved with their names. She smiled softly, her fingers gently tracing the inscription, "Selina and Adrian. Justice and love. No one could have predicted that those two words would be torn apart by abuse of power just a few minutes later, and the wedding night would become a night of arrest. No one at the party noticed when the red and blue lights began flashing at the gate. The gentle music played, and laughter filled the garden under the sparkling fairy lights. Selena and Adrian, hand in hand, were preparing to toast the second round with both sets of parents. But then, Leah, Selena's 9-year-old niece, tugged at her mother's hand, whispering, "Mom, there are a lot of police cars. Why are they here?" Everyone turned their heads. Through the meticulously trimmed green hedge, 4 police cars were neatly parked at the gate. 6 officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, eyes scanning the yard as if searching for signs of crime. Adrian immediately felt his body tense like a steel wire. He read that body language as a seasoned FBI agent, not here to talk, but to control. He gently squeezed Selena's hand, whispering, "Don't panic. But this isn't a routine check." Selena, with over 10 years of experience on the judge's bench, instantly understood the look in the sergeant's eyes approaching. There was no courtesy in his gait, no smile, no greeting, only suspicion and authority. Sergeant Kevin Mallory walked straight into the premises without knocking or giving permission. We received reports of a disorderly gathering and signs of illegal stimulant possession. Everyone is to remain in place and present identification. No one had time to react. Selena stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Officer, this is a wedding at a private residence. We have a permit to hold it. No one has violated anything. I am Judge Selena Monroe of the federal court." Kevin raised an eyebrow, glancing at her as if assessing an item out of place. "A judge here?" He chuckled lightly with a hint of sarcasm. "Anyone can claim that. Please step aside. We will check everyone." Adrian stepped forward, his voice low but forceful. "I am Federal Agent Adrian Monroe. My wife is not claiming anything. If you need verification, follow protocol, instead of breaking into a private home without a search warrant." The atmosphere froze. Officer Beck, the youngest in the group, hesitated slightly, glancing at Kevin as if hoping for a signal to stop. But Kevin had already turned away, gesturing for his colleagues to spread out and inspect the premises. The music was cut. Guests began to retreat, murmuring. Some raised their phones. Others just held their loved ones tightly. Selena's mother whispered to her husband, "Why is this happening on our daughter's wedding day?" That question no one at the wedding could answer. But the woman behind the curtain 3 houses away, Mrs. Meredith Grant, was smiling and sipping her tea, as if everything was going according to plan. Immediately after the police team dispersed, the ceremony, atmosphere was suffocated in a tense silence. The guests who had been laughing and toasting moments before now gradually retreated, clustering into small groups, eyes wary. Selena still stood upright, holding her wedding dress to avoid tripping, her voice firm. "Officer Mallory, I demand you clearly state the legal basis for this unlawful search." Kevin. Mallory did not answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at a young officer checking the handbag of an elderly guest. Someone reported drugs and suspicious behavior. "Do you want me to ignore the risk to keep your wedding intact?" Adrian clenched his fists. He saw the disdain in how the sergeant said, "Your wedding." He stepped forward. "Where is the warrant?" "Without it, this is an illegal intrusion into a private residence." Mallory tilted his chin. "The warrant will come later. We have the right to intervene in emergencies." Still appearing uncomfortable, Officer Beck approached a group of children gathered near the koi pond. Among them was Jaden, Adrian's 12-year-old adopted son, his face pale with fear. Beck reached for his belt, as if preparing to interrogate. Selena immediately turned quickly, walking toward her son. "He is a minor. You are not allowed to approach without a parent or guardian present." Beck stepped back, but his eyes were full of unease, as if he were witnessing something he couldn't believe. In the yard, another officer began requesting guests to present identification. A black doctor, a close friend of Adrian, handed over his driver's license, but was still asked for further checks. An Asian woman was asked to open her purse, even though she was standing next to the wedding cake table. The murmurs grew louder. An elderly guest spoke up. "They're not asking any white people, only checking people of color." No one argued, because it was the truth. Selena looked around as a judge amid an inverted courtroom where the law was twisted at the whim of those enforcing it. She called out, "This is systemic discrimination. All of you are on the verge of violating the civil rights of everyone present here." Kevin Mallory laughed coldly. "Then go ahead and sue, Judge. Let's see who believes you." At that moment, an unexpected guest stepped forward. Mr. Isaac DuPont, a senior judge higher in rank than Selena, attended the wedding as a longtime friend. He calmly took out his badge and said, "I am Federal Judge Isaac DuPont. I confirm all documents and procedures here are legal, and I am a witness to your abuse of power." Kevin Mallory's face turned pale for a moment, but then he squinted. "I don't care who you are. Here I'm in charge of the scene." Those words had crossed the line. Selena turned to look at Adrian. No words were exchanged, but both knew this battle would no longer be just a war of words. As soon as Officer Kevin Mallory's final words fell, the atmosphere in the yard turned to ice. The confirmation of identity from Federal Judge Isaac DuPont should have stopped the law enforcement operation, but instead, it only made them dig in deeper. Adrian whispered to Selena, "They're trying to provoke us. All it takes is one person losing their temper, and they'll have an excuse." Selena nodded, but her eyes didn't leave Officer Mallory's face, as if she were sentencing him with her gaze. And then the unthinkable happened. One of the younger officers, Travis, suddenly shoved a young black man who was recording the incident with his phone. The phone flew out of his hand and shattered on the ground. The guest yelled, "What the hell are you doing? I'm just filming." Travis bent down, pinning the young man, his hand rummaging through the boy's jacket pockets. Selena screamed, "Stop it! That's assault! Anyone filming? Keep filming." The crowd began to stir, more people pulling out their phones. Some guests cried. Others grew furious and started shouting, "You're abusing your power. None of us did anything wrong. This is a wedding, not a crime scene." A female officer named Keller leaned over to whisper something into Mallory's ear. And like a spark in dry brush, Mallory grabbed his radio. "All units detain anyone who doesn't cooperate, immediately." Adrian stepped forward, shielding Selena. "That's enough. I am Federal Agent Adrian Reyes, badge number 49732. Your actions have exceeded all lawful boundaries." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "Oh, now I've bagged a judge and an FBI agent. This wedding keeps getting better." He signaled. Two other officers rushed forward. They began to restrain Adrian, wrenching his arms behind his back. Selena screamed, "Stop! This is unlawful detention. I'll sue. I swear before the court I will." The handcuffs clicked shut, cold and indifferent. Adrian was slammed to the ground. His wedding suit tore at the shoulder. Once neatly combed, the hair was now streaked with dirt and grass. Selena cried out, "He's not resisting. He upholds the law. What are you doing?" Another officer rushed toward her without warning. His hand yanked her arm behind her back and locked the cuffs. Selena gritted her teeth. She didn't cry. She looked straight into a guest's recording camera. "Keep filming. Let the whole country see the kind of justice they want to protect." In the distance, little Jaden sobbed uncontrollably. An officer tried to pull him away from his trembling grandmother. The boy struggled. "Don't take me from Grandma. Mom, Dad, help me." Selena turned her head, tears finally falling. "Jaden, I'm here. I promise I won't let them hurt you." But that promise was being strangled by a pair of steel cuffs. The wedding shattered. Not because of a failed marriage, but because a system meant to protect justice had chosen to disgrace it. And in that moment, what Adrian and Selena knew more clearly than anyone, tonight wasn't over. The real fight had only just begun. The cold clang of handcuffs still echoed in the ears of the guests. Selena and Adrian had been separated. Those detained were herded into a corner of the yard, lined up like criminals. Children cried. Elderly guests gasped for breath. The scene no longer resembled a wedding, it looked like a crackdown operation. And then, a glimmer of light in the storm. A young guest, Jules, a communications student, was still live streaming the entire situation from their phone. Within minutes, the video had attracted hundreds of live viewers. Comments poured down the screen. What the hell is happening? That's a wedding. There are children there. Did she just say she's a judge? At a local newsroom, investigative journalist Callie Nguyen happened to see the live stream as it was shared in a private journalist forum. She gasped, "Oh my God, it's Selena DuPont." Immediately, Callie picked up the phone and called her editor. "We've got breaking news. We need to go live. Now." Back at the scene, Officer Mallory still seemed unaware that everything he was doing was being broadcast live. He barked orders. "Confiscate all phones. Anyone filming is obstructing an officer." A young officer approached Jules, reaching for the phone. But Jules, sharper than their age, shouted, "I'm live streaming. 5,000 people are watching already. You want them to see you assault an unarmed student." The threat of digital justice made the officer freeze. Jules stepped back, holding the phone steady. "Everyone, keep recording. As much as you can. They can't arrest us all." Selena, still handcuffed, turned to look at Jules. Their eyes met. And in that moment, she knew, we're not alone anymore. From the corner of the yard, Mr. Marvin, a longtime family friend, stepped forward. Once a young war correspondent, he pulled a small GoPro hidden inside his jacket pocket. He quietly hit record. A middle-aged couple, both former attorneys, also took out their phones. "We'll submit all footage to internal oversight." The atmosphere began to shift. What started as fear turned into resistance, quiet but resolute. More and more cameras lit up. More and more eyes dared to look directly at injustice. Officer Keller, the one who had previously whispered a warning to Mallory, began to hesitate. She pulled Mallory aside. "They're live streaming. Someone recognized the bride as a federal judge. If this blows up, we're finished." Mallory scowled, grinding his teeth. "Shut them down. Now." But it was too late. Several videos had already been shared on Twitter. The hashtags #WeddingRaid and #JusticeForSelena began trending. Meanwhile, an agent monitoring internal reports at FBI headquarters noticed the name Adrian Reyes surfacing in a breaking news bulletin. He immediately called his superior. "Agent Reyes has been arrested at his wedding. This is serious." And then the unexpected happened. Officer Mallory's phone rang. The caller ID read, "Chief of City Police." He hesitated, then picked up. There was only one sentence. "Stand down. Don't make me get a call from the White House." Selena and Adrian still didn't know what was happening outside, but they could feel it. The tide was turning. Adrian whispered, "If they came to take us by force, we'll fight back with truth." Selena nodded, a faint smile appearing on her bruised face, and with the light from every single camera in the night. The ringtone from the chief of police struck like a slap in the dead of night. Officer Mallory stepped back into the shadows behind the fence, pressing the phone tight to her ear. "Sir, there's a situation. I don't care about the situation. You just arrested a federal judge and an FBI agent at their wedding. The media is sweeping Twitter. CNN already reached out. What are you waiting for to pull your team back?" Mallory clenched her hat strap. Her voice trembled, though she tried to sound firm. I have reason to believe there may be illegal activity. And I believe you just crushed this department's future. Take off the cuffs, lower your tone, and pray they don't sue us to the ground." The call ended. Mallory's face turned pale. Inside, Selena and Adrian were still being restrained. Their faces were swollen from the pressure, but their eyes grew sharper. Selena, though her hands were still cuffed behind her back, kept her chin high. "I will remember every face tonight, and I will write about it through the law." Then something unexpected happened. Officer Keller, the youngest in the team, slowly approached Selena. "I have orders to release you." She hesitated, then unlocked the cuffs. The click echoed like a gunshot, signaling the shift of power. Everything suddenly paused. The other officers glanced at each other, confused. The sense of control slipped through their fingers like sand. Adrian immediately stood up and walked over to his wife. "You all right?" Selena nodded, wiping blood from her lip. "We're still standing. As for them, they're imploding." Then a black SUV pulled up to the end of the street. The door opened. A man in an FBI windbreaker stepped out. Supervisory Agent Daniel Ruiz, Internal Affairs Division. He held up his badge. "Who here arrested Adrian Reyes?" The entire police squad went dead silent. Mallory stepped forward, pale as a ghost. I responded to a reported suspicion call." "And did you have a search warrant?" "An arrest order." "Any legal grounds at all?" "I perceived signs of violation." "You perceived? Or did you imagine them to justify your bias?" Ruiz's voice dropped, but cut like a knife. "Do you know who just called me the Department of Justice? Maybe even the Vice President. If there's no civil lawsuit after tonight, it'll only be because you got lucky." The officers began to retreat. They moved back toward their cars one by one, leaving behind a crowd of stunned guests. The sirens wailed, but this time not to intimidate, to withdraw. Selena watched them go, then turned to Adrian. "They think just walking away makes it right. No. Tonight is only the beginning." In a corner of the yard, Jules, the one live streaming, checked their feed. 50,000 viewers, and rising every minute. News outlets are sending interview requests. Adrian stepped forward, voice echoing across the yard. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just been violated by the people sworn to protect us. We will not be silent. We will not forgive. And we sure as hell will not back down." The entire crowd erupted in applause and chants. Justice, justice, justice. 2 days after the wedding incident, City Hall was packed. Outside, hundreds held up signs, "We are Selena and Adrian. Cops are not the judge. Justice doesn't see color." Inside, the atmosphere was even more tense. At an emergency hearing of the City Police Oversight Council, Selena appeared no longer in her ivory wedding dress, but in a sharply cut black suit. Under the lights, the bruises on her wrists, the marks left by the handcuffs that night, were still visible. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She looked each council member straight in the eye and began, "My name is Federal Judge Selena Torres. On the night of June 12th, I was unlawfully arrested, handcuffed in front of my parents, in front of my niece, simply for hosting a wedding in my own home." The sound of camera shutters filled the room, but she paid them no mind. "I am not standing here to talk only about my pain. I am here to speak of a rotten system, one in which a single biased phone call from a neighbor can activate an emergency-level response team." In the back row, Adrian sat beside the federal chief counsel, his arm still bandaged. He fixed his eyes on his wife, watching her transform from victim to justice seeker. Selena placed a thick folder on the podium. "This is a copy of 19 complaints filed against Officer Mallory over the past 7 years. 5 of them involve racial discrimination, all marked as recorded and never addressed. This is the video of her slamming a 12-year-old girl to the ground at my wedding because the child didn't produce ID. This is a list of 7 elderly guests who were detained overnight without charges, without bail, for saying, "Let her speak." No one interrupted. No one dared. Selena looked down at her folder, then back up. "I am not asking for pardon. I am demanding action. I demand the immediate suspension of all officers at the scene that night. I demand criminal prosecution of the 3 individuals who used force. And I demand an apology not for me, but for every silent victim of the past." The courtroom erupted in applause. Amid justice for Selena chants, Adrian stepped up to the podium beside her. He didn't speak long. "I once stood alongside those with guns and badges to defend this country. That night I had a gun pointed at me in my own home. There are no words left to justify this. Only action can make it right." After the hearing, the Department of Justice spokesperson confirmed a formal federal investigation had been launched. 8 officers had been suspended. All footage from live streams and personal cameras had been submitted to the district attorney. The city police department temporarily stopped accepting complaints because they were overwhelmed. That evening, on a national news broadcast, a journalist asked Judge Torres, "After everything that's happened, are you afraid?" Selena looked directly into the lens. "I'm afraid of only one thing: silence. And I will never choose it." After the explosive public hearing, the wave of justice didn't stop at statements. Selena and Adrian decided to take it one step further, launching an official legal battle against the entire city police department and the officers involved. The lawsuit was filed in federal court with 3 primary claims. 1. Violation of civil rights. Civil Rights Act, Section 1983. 2. Systemic abuse of power. 3. Physical, emotional, and reputational harm inflicted on innocent civilians, especially children and the elderly. 4. This was no longer a personal grievance. 5. It had become a model case for institutional reform. Representing the Torres couple was a powerhouse law firm, Grant Devine and Lynn, the firm that won a landmark case against the Chicago Police Department in 2019. They immediately summoned more than 30 witnesses, including guests from the wedding, catering and service staff, an Asian American neighbor who live-streamed the entire incident from her balcony, helping the video go viral nationwide. But the police department didn't remain silent. Their media division launched a smear campaign, released edited footage showing a few guests appearing to cause disruption, dug into Adrian's past, hinting that he had been under internal investigation. In reality, he had been fully exonerated. Paraded Mrs. Rose, the neighbor on television, who labeled the wedding a suspicious public gathering. The goal was clear: distort the truth and divide public opinion. Selena struck back with justice and strategy. At a press conference held right outside the courthouse, she said just 3 sentences. "When women are dragged away like criminals in the middle of their wedding, when children are searched like suspects for the color of their skin, and when police say, 'We don't care if you're a judge,' that is no longer personal conduct, but a nurtured mindset." In federal court, Selena entered the preliminary hearing like a warrior. Evidence: 17 videos from 12 camera angles confirming abuse of power. Witnesses: an 83-year-old man who nearly suffered a stroke after being shoved. Physical exhibits: her torn, blood-stained wedding dress presented as evidence of a rotten system. The police side began to collapse. The city's attorney requested a postponement of the hearing, but the federal judge refused. Looking at Selena, he said, "You were once my colleague. I trust you understand justice doesn't wait." That same night, a leaked document hit the press. The police department had received 3 prior warnings from independent inspectors about Officer Mallory's conduct. An internal email directive read, "Control this wedding at all costs. Anonymous, unsigned." Adrian, now drawing on his FBI expertise, launched a counter-investigation. He reached out to former colleagues to gather suppressed disciplinary records, internal radio recordings capturing the command, No warrant needed. Just go in. A list of victims who never dared to speak out. The official trial began. Federal Court Courtroom 2A was packed. Reporters, civil rights activists, local politicians. Every gaze was fixed on the lawsuit brought by Selena and Adrian Torres. For the plaintiffs, Selena, a veteran federal judge, is now a victim before the system she once served. Adrian, a seasoned FBI agent who once swore an oath to the Constitution, is now handcuffed in his own home. Lead counsel, Diana Chang, a renowned Asian American attorney known for winning the 2019 City v. Thomas case over racial discrimination at a high school festival. For the defendants, representatives of the city's police department and 12 named officers. Chief Officer Ray Mallory, who ordered the bride and groom's arrest, is now facing potential criminal prosecution. The hearing opened with a 4-minute uncut video. The entire scene of the wedding, turned into a crackdown, was projected on a large screen. The bride handcuffed amid crying children, police pushing the elderly, frisking children, wedding guests kneeling on the grass, one of them still wearing priest robes. No one in the courtroom spoke. Only the sound of heavy breathing filled the silence. Attorney Diana began her argument. This is no longer a procedural error. This is a systemic abuse of power, fueled by racial bias, shielded by badges, and legitimized by silence. She presented internal audio transcripts. Increase pressure control. Now don't let them react. 7 medical reports from victims with minor physical injuries and post-traumatic symptoms. Internal emails instructing. Separate the hosts from the crowd. The climax came when Selena took the stand. She did not speak in dry legal terms. She testified, "I used to sentence those who violated human rights. But that night, I was dragged like a criminal into the middle of my wedding, before the eyes of elderly parents and trembling children. I did not cry from pain. I cried because justice did not show up, even though I knew exactly where it should have been." Behind her, many wept. Some were mothers. Others had lived similar moments, but never had a voice. The police side responded weakly. They claimed they acted by protocol due to an anonymous call. Mallory blamed dispatch for lack of information. They tried to frame everything as a procedural mishap, but Diana landed the blow. If your procedures allow arresting a bride, shoving the elderly into patrol cars, and handcuffing minors, then the problem isn't the individual actions. The problem is the system, and you are the ones maintaining it. Then came a turning point. A young officer among the defendants, Jackson, requested to testify off-list. On the stand, he confessed, "I heard the command over the radio. It's a wedding with people of color. No need to wait for a warrant. I stayed silent out of fear of being reassigned. But today, I don't want to remain silent anymore." The courtroom gasped. After nearly 3 intense weeks of trial, the verdict was delivered. Hundreds of citizens, reporters, and advocates had gathered outside the federal courthouse. Inside, no one dared to breathe too loud. Everyone knew this moment would go down in history. Presiding Judge Rafael Munoz spoke slowly, but with piercing clarity. This court does not only rule on actions, it rules on attitudes and the motives behind them. In this case, there wasn't just an overreach. There was a sophisticated, racially biased system disguised under the label of law enforcement. The court's ruling. Officer Ray Mallory, the commanding officer, found guilty of abuse of power, racial discrimination, and unnecessary use of force. Badge permanently revoked, banned from law enforcement, pending higher criminal prosecution. 7 officers involved in the unlawful crackdown, suspended from duty, personally liable. 1 officer faces charges of assaulting a minor under 16. The local police department ordered to issue a public apology and pay $6 million in damages, including specific funds for trauma therapy for child victims. mandated to reform its civil complaint intake and handling procedures. The courtroom erupted. Some guests embraced and cried. Others shouted, "We will not be silent anymore. Justice doesn't see color." In the front row, Selena and Adrian held hands in silence, but in their eyes, there was fire. No more fear, no more submission. News headlines exploded that same day. Judge Turner and FBI agent win, biggest lawsuit of the year. Officer Mallory loses badge. America faces a reckoning on police overreach. After justice. For Torres. Hashtag surpasses 20 million mentions in 12 hours. But to Selena and Adrian, this wasn't the end. That evening, back in their old house, once the scene of injustice, Selena looked out into the backyard and sighed. "We've won one battle. But how many others out there have no voice like we do?" Adrian nodded. "It's time to turn this into a movement." The preliminary verdict was officially announced after nearly 3 weeks of tense proceedings. Hundreds of citizens, journalists, and activists gathered outside the federal courthouse. Inside, no one dared to breathe heavily. Everyone knew this moment would go down in history. Presiding Judge Rafael Munoz spoke slowly but piercingly. The court does not merely rule on actions. It rules on attitudes and the motivations behind them. In this case, what we are judging is not only excessive conduct, but also a sophisticated system of racial discrimination disguised as law enforcement. The court's verdict. Officer Ray Mallory, who gave the command to act, found guilty of abuse of power, racial discrimination, and intentional use of unnecessary force. Permanently stripped of his badge, banned from law enforcement, and faced higher-level criminal trial. 7 officers involved in the unlawful enforcement, suspended from duty, and held individually accountable. 1 officer facing criminal charges for assaulting a minor under 16. The local police department ordered to issue a public apology and pay $6 million in damages, including a designated fund for psychological support of child victims. Mandated to reform procedures for receiving and handling civilian complaints. The courtroom erupted. Some attendees embraced and wept. Many shouted, "We will not be silent anymore. Justice doesn't see color." Selena and Adrian quietly held hands in the front row, saying nothing. But their eyes, burning bright, were no longer afraid, no longer cornered. The press reported that very day, Judge Turner and FBI agent win the biggest lawsuit of the year. Officer Mallory loses badge. America faces tough questions on police overreach. Hashtag justice for Torres. Hashtag spreads to over 20 million shares in just 12 hours. But for Selena and Adrian, this was far from the end. That evening, returning to the old house, the scene of the trampling, Selena looked at the backyard and sighed. "We've won one battle. But how many people don't have a voice like ours?" Adrian nodded. "It's time to turn this into a movement. No one is born a hero, but when no one else speaks up, ordinary people become symbols." 6 months after the verdict, America was no longer the same. The lives of Selena Torres and Adrian Torres had also entered an entirely new chapter. No more judge, no more FBI badge, no more blood-stained wedding dress in memory. Selena founded the Torres Foundation for Equal Justice, a nonprofit legal organization dedicated to supporting victims of police misconduct, families of people of color, and minorities facing systemic bias in the justice system, children traumatized by unlawful crackdowns. In the first 4 months, the foundation supported over 70 cases, won 19 major lawsuits, and helped restore dignity to hundreds of families. Every time I stand up for someone, I wash away the stain of my wedding day. Selena speaking at Harvard Law School. Adrian, after resigning, became a public speaker and police policy reform specialist. Using his first-hand FBI experience, he worked to expose systemic gaps in civilian complaint processing. Proposed 7 structural reforms, including mandatory 24/7 body cam usage, real-time ethics, Scoring system for officers. Automatic internal investigations, triggered by any use of force against children or the elderly. He became a familiar face at congressional hearings, viewed as a voice from both sides of the badge. The Torres wedding arrest and victory evolved into a nationwide movement known as #Justice is not optional. Over 100 cities held peaceful marches demanding police reform. 17 officers in other states were suspended based on footage recorded by citizens who dared to film like the guests at the Torres wedding. A new bill named the Selena-Adrian Act was introduced in the House aimed at protecting privacy and banning warrantless searches. A year later, at the exact location where the wedding had once taken place, Selena and Adrian hosted a small ceremony. No lavish gown, no VIP guests, just those who had been arrested with them, children who had cried in fear that night, and a large oak tree planted in the center of the yard bearing a small plaque that read, "Here they tried to turn love into fear, but we turned it into hope." The Torres family, 2025. 2 people emerged from a rotten system, trampled, dragged down, but never defeated. They didn't just reclaim justice for themselves. They carved a path for thousands more to follow. And if one day you find yourself pushed to the edge, remember justice isn't far away. It's right where you choose to stand.